This is TWiT.
We're not alone. We have a guest. Olivier Sylvain is the professor and author of a brand new book, well, relatively new, came out a couple of months ago, Reclaiming the Internet, How Big Tech Took Control and How We Can Take It Back, from Columbia Global Reports. Professor Sylvain, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a thrill to join you folks here.
We're glad to have you. You're a law professor, but I think people might recognize your name because you were at the FTC as senior advisor to Lina Khan for a couple of years. And
yeah, they may recognize my name because of that. I was mostly behind the scenes, senior advisor. For a middle-aged person to take some time away from academia, it was a thrill to join Chair Khan at an exciting time at the FTC.
Well, where is bureaucracy worse, university or federal government?
Wow, that's a tough one. But you know the answer to that, I think, Jeff. The answer is government is pretty thick with bureaucracy. And if maybe another book, I could talk a little bit about why some of the things I would have loved to have seen didn't happen. But that's another story.
Well, Chair Khan really very young, came out of academia as well, and really took on big tech. Unfortunately, a number of the cases she brought have been dropped in the subsequent administration, so I can't say she had a run of successes. I wish she had. I think she was doing the right thing.
She certainly changed the discussion and the agenda.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I think I understand your point. Given that, after 4 years, you have a new administration that comes in and pulls a rug on from under. Sure, but I think I'm with Jeff here. I'm probably go further and say the 4 years were successful, at least because it opened the aperture for what is possible. The kinds of things that I focus on were consumer protection issues, not competition issues. And with regards to competition, I'm happy to talk about that stuff. But with regards to consumer protection, there are a couple statutory authorities that the FTC is currently using more than they had before. This FTC. Including ROSCA, a statutes addressed to dark patterns on online activity, and Section 5 on fairness. It's not just deception anymore, right? It's not just false claims that companies make about their services. It's also just foundational unfairness. This is something this current administration is using as well. So I actually think there's a lot of success that happened in the administration under Khan's leadership.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to government, it's progress, not perfection. You always hope to make little incremental improvements bit by bit. So I want to talk a little bit about your book. First of all, why do we need to reclaim the internet? Who's got it now?
Well, it's not the so-called users that many of us were fantasizing about in the 1990s. That I know that Professor Jarvis has written about. It's not them, and I think that's a pretty uncontroversial observation. The argument in the book is that you just have to look as far as the inauguration stage in January 2025 to see what's happened, where the dominant players in our tech information economy were sitting right behind the president and very quickly benefited from the president's promises. So the extractive model that a lot of people have written about has gotten some rocket fuel under this administration. Those are the folks that are running the show now, but they have for a while. And part of the reason I is because of what Congress and the courts have done over the past couple of decades.
They might defend themselves saying, hey, but we built it without our capital, without our servers, without our software. What would the internet be? I mean, we the people put the content on there, but it's their servers that we put the content on.
Yeah. It's also kind of the telco argument, too, that we were going through with net neutrality versus the platform argument.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about telcos. I mean, I start as a tech lawyer at Jenner & Block working on FCC issues. So I agree. There are echoes with regards to telco, but these are not companies that built it alone, right? I mean, the argument that I make is that they rely on a regulatory regime that is especially forgiving, especially deferential, so that the business model that emerges in the early 2000s never gets a close look until relatively recently. And so they got a big boost. As the more provocative claim I make, and I don't think is inaccurate, I'd love someone to tell me I'm wrong, is that the only industry that enjoys the same sort of legal protection, if not, is the gun industry. And so these are companies that can get away with building applications and services that, hold people's attention, even at the expense of those very consumers.
Yeah, you actually talk about the gun industry when you're talking about Section 230, which we're going to get to. It's Jeff and I both come from the John Perry Barlow generation of, we believed the internet was going to democratize everything and it was going to open up a whole new means of communication and so forth. And so it is
like Commissioner Khan's, like you're pointing about Commissioner Khan's tenure. In many ways, it has.
Well, that's the thing. It's a mixed bag.
We need reject. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. By the way, I mean it's who couldn't agree with the idea that it's been transformational in many good ways for sure.
And yet we're also fans of Cory Doctorow and acknowledge that enshittification is rampant. And you call it ruthless commercial exploitation, but it's the same thing. And
I just reread the Hutchins Commission report from 1947 about the media and the news industry. And, I think we think nostalgically that media back then was good before it got shittified.
Right.
But there was a whole commission brought together because people thought that media was back then.
Well, isn't it kind of the way of capitalism? We thought the internet was free. We were obviously deluded. And at some point, the bill came due, and these companies were giving it away probably fully with knowledge that at some point they were going to be able to exploit it. And as Shoshana Zuboff has pointed out, I know you're not a huge fan of hers, Jeff, but that's kind of the nature of surveillance capitalism, that she would say the whole thing was built specifically for that purpose. How do we reclaim it? I mean, I think we don't have to debate that. I think everybody's watching.
We need a better internet, without question.
Knows we need a better internet, but how do we get there?
I like reading that stuff from the 90s, Barlow and
he fatted the EFF,
the American Dream. I mean, there are all these really, really amazing peons on what is possible. Even Yochai Benkler, when he writes The Wealth of Networks in 2006, is still tapping into that. It's really attractive.
Yeah.
And, as someone who with ACLU roots, there's a libertarian in me somewhere that thinks, this is really, really great stuff. But I think that discourse, that language was always distracting and insufficiently alert to what, as you say, what happens in capitalism, right? I mean, there are business models that have to emerge. The one thing I don't think people totally got, or maybe I didn't, at least maybe you did, is the dramatic information asymmetry between the administrators of servers and the services behind the screen and the consumers. I don't think people totally understood what that would look like. They really thought that they would be governing the space co-equally, but that of course was never the case.
But I'm sorry, I'm going to do this because I write books about the history of media and technology. If we go back, the asymmetry was tremendous in mass media.
Yes.
People had no opportunity to speak whatsoever. That's what the Hutchins Commission report worries about, just to call on that again. And so the asymmetry may still be there, but isn't it tremendously lessened in that anyone can speak now? No guarantee of being heard, never was, never should be. So the asymmetry is still there. I'll agree with you, but isn't it a lot better than it was?
So I think potentially it was, but I'm happy to talk about this, Jeff, because I'm also a media history kind of person. the fairness doctrine is not, unimportant for thinking about the obligations that companies have. The licensing regime that the FCC sets up, or that Congress sets up, that the FCC implements, is not, incidental. It's important to addressing the asymmetry, right? I mean, the language that the courts and policymakers are making, as you know, is that there are just a handful of broadcasters who are running the show, and we have to keep them accountable. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that comparative licensing regime as it was set up. It was rife with corruption too, but at least there was a mechanism for regulatory oversight. We haven't had this in the internet setting ever.
But wasn't broadcast the exception to, I mean, the rights that were given to print were sliced down like bologna, come radio. And again, reading about that, and you know far more about this than I do, having worked at the FCC and understanding the roots of its regulation. But that was a slice taken out of the First Amendment, so that print had far more rights and remains with far more rights than broadcast did, and far more respect, I would say, print has than broadcast did. And so in an internet where people have the ability to respond, the ability to speak, should it be closer to print or to broadcast in its regulatory regime?
I mean, this is a great question. This is the perennial question, and the Supreme Court. I mean, I'm gonna answer by starting with what the courts have said, which I know you know the answer to, and then tell you what I think. But they've said it's much more like newspapers, right? When Justice Stevens for the Supreme Court writes the Reno versus ACLU opinion, he's talking about pamphleteers and libraries, right?
Wow.
The web is one big library, and that we're all individual pamphleteers. I think he is taken the story that Barlow and others are telling full cloth and restating it in the language of law. I think that was wrong. And I don't blame them. I was right there, right? I mean, I mean, younger, but definitely excited about what was possible. The problem is that it went further, right? The First Amendment is one thing, and then Congress. I know, Leo, you said we'll talk about it. I can't help but bring it up, but Congress goes further and insulates the companies from liability. Publishers are not subject to that same sort of benefit, right? So this goes beyond even what newspapers are doing. And what I'm talking about is this protection under 47 U.S.C. 230.
Right, but when I started, I worked for I'm not a real professor, by the way, just to be clear here. I snuck in through the side door of journalism. But when I worked as president of creative director of Advanced.net, I started all of our newspaper sites, and so I worked on our magazine sites and so on. We were highly interactive. We were highly open to having the public there. My boss, Steve Newhouse, believed in that immensely, that this was very different from a content-based medium of magazines. But if I knew our lawyers well, and if we had been liable for the speech of others on our platform, we wouldn't have had it.
Right.
And I shudder to think how much would have been lost and still could be lost. And we see it happening just for the expense of moderation. And I think your points about moderation are right, and we'll get to that. A lot of people are taking down comments and forums and such because it's too much of a pain in the ass, not because it's libel. But if you add liability into that, do we end up back in the place where there's a few media brands and they're theirs and they're not ours, and we can't speak in them?
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is a realistic threat when you don't have there are no mechanisms to protect publishers in the way you described, and especially online, right? There's so much more content trafficking through servers online than on a newspaper,
mm-hmm.
right? So the exposure is tremendous. I'm with you there. The problem is that I don't think there's any shortage of incentive to build business models that could account for that potential. There was just so much commercial opportunity. I didn't know what it was, but I don't think that I think there are companies that would have come up with strategies to account for potentially unlawful distribution of content. And I don't know this for a fact, but this is a hunch that I have. And it would have been nice to have seen what it would look like in the absence of this substantial statutory protection. For what it's worth, there is a protection under First Amendment doctrine for newspapers, and that would have been applied to the internet. And that is, once the companies know that they're distributing information that is harmful, they should be held accountable. When they don't know, I'm with you, Jeff, that's not something that you could really anticipate. But when they know as a matter of course that this is happening, that unlawful stuff is being distributed, they should be held accountable. I would like to see what a world looks like when that liability regime exists.
Hold on a second. We're talking to Professor Olivier Sylvain. He's professor of law at Fordham University, as you mentioned, a former ACLU fellow in the legal office in New York. He is also I think former director at the Knight Institute. Is that right? Or are you still there?
I was just finished 2.5 stint there, the research fellow. Yeah.
Also the author of a new book called Reclaiming the Internet, How Big Tech Took Control and How We Can Take It Back. So I just want to raise one issue. And I think it's really timely because, of course, we just had the decision in Los Angeles with Facebook or Meta and also in New Mexico. And I think it's timely because I want to really make a distinction when you talk about Section 230. Often, I think far too often, we talk about Section 230 with regard to big tech, companies like Meta. But I run a discourse forum. I run a Mastodon instance. I'm running a chat room right now on Discord. I am not a big guy, and Section 230 protects me because I don't have to defend myself in court. I understand your desire to say, let's go to court so that we can, litigate these issues. But Section 230 cuts that off. It doesn't let it go to a case. It's a defense. And I just say, no, you can't sue me because I am not the publisher of this content. I'm just providing this form. Plus I can moderate it thanks to Section 230. I can't be prevented from moderating it or not moderating it. Right. I think that's really important. Absent that kind of protection, I can't afford to go to court. I would shut those down.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think that there's a big distinction between how Section 230 is used by big tech and how it protects little tech, little guys like me.
Yeah, I think that's what Jeff was channeling as well. I'm sure that you two worked on extraordinary projects online. I love to talk about Wikipedia in this regard.
Good example.
Yes.
It is a miracle to me. I can't believe that is community governed, not entirely, but that it looks the way it does is astonishing. And I think that's, if there's a case to be made that that small tech, let's call it medium or small tech, requires legal protection, it's a company like that, or the ones you described. Listen, I'm sympathetic to that instinct, but there is another protection that these companies enjoy, and that's the First Amendment. And the Supreme Court ratified a pretty generous view of what the First Amendment means and the choices that companies make about the content they distribute a couple of years ago, Moody versus NetChoice. So I know we're going to talk about Section 230, but I want to make sure that Section 230 lays atop another protection that comes.
Yes.
Now,
except that I would have to defend that in court as opposed to short-circuiting it with 230.
Yeah, and I have the benefit of never having run a company, and maybe that's a bad thing. I think many people probably think it is a bad thing that I and others who are critical haven't been in the shoes that you've been in. But as I said earlier, I would like to see what the world looks like when companies do have an incentive to build services and filters and moderation techniques, because there's so much money to be made. So I would like to see what that world looks like. I do think that there's some companies that would be chilled, right?
All of the services I just described are pro bono. We do not make money on them. I would have to shut them down. Period.
With the risk because of the risk of litigation.
Yeah, I cannot defend any litigation.
Well,
there are people out there who would happily sue me because it would be a chance to shut me down. So that's issue one. Now, I don't disagree with you, and I think this recent LA case is very interesting, that there are product liabilities.
and product design questions, which is different from the content questions, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Does Section 230 protect them in that case as well?
So this is what I've been arguing for the past 10 years. And I would like at some point, if we could, circle back to this really interesting, provocative point you've made about small tech, right? So I do want to turn to it. But this is, you're talking about as the heartland of what I've been arguing for a long time, and that Section 230 should not be invoked by companies, small or big, to the extent that the argument that plaintiffs make, that victims make, or that the ways in which a company's design their services ought to be subject to legal scrutiny. Never mind the content that goes, through from users.
Yeah, that's these really two different issues.
Yeah, so
and you also you say it's the algorithm. And I certainly think you can make the case that they've designed an algorithm to be addictive, compulsive even. Look at people scrolling through Instagram in the middle of the night, including me.
Like reading a Dickens novel, though.
Or like Dickens. That's problematic. But I would also point out that even if you merely made an algorithm to surface the most interesting material, the stuff, in other words, if you turn that algorithm off, and you're going to make a product that is not as good, let alone compelling.
Well,
so there's some defense in making in algorithms in general.
Yeah, I mean, the internet is comprised of algorithms, right?
Right. Without
everything is a choice. Everything.
An editor makes a choice on the front page of the New York Times.
Right. Well. Who wants to read something reversed chronological order, right? I mean, or alphabetical order or whatever. I mean, there's something about the algorithmic delivery of content that people want to see. That, of course, is something we can celebrate on the one hand, but that's not really for me. That is a misdirection in some ways. And we can talk about the trials just to get at this a little bit, right? So the trial out of New Mexico involves claims that the state attorney general makes that says that that Facebook is basically a space in which predators can find, sexual predators can find young people. And this is demonstrably true. As well as design services that are with the limitless scroll and video autoplay, doing something that resembles addiction. The key point is that Section 230 blocked inquiry into whether the companies could be held liable for that.
Period.
Right? That's what 230 blocked. Not whether, and by the way, I'm not sure whether in any given circumstance an algorithmic recommendation should be something that we, hold someone legally liable for. But the inquiry itself was blocked off until courts started getting hip to this design theory, which is happening. There's a big case out of California involving Lemon. I mean, all these big cases are out of California, but the Lemon versus Snap, where Snap has a speed filter that you could predict a teenage boy driving a car is going to use really dangerously.
Yeah, I've used it, although on the Shuriken in Japan, to see how fast the bullet train was going. So there are also legitimate uses of that.
Oh, that's a pretty good use, yeah.
I understand. You use as an example in your book Arms List, which is a marketplace for unregistered firearm sales. And they escaped liability because those gun listings were third-party content. And so that is something maybe that's a little more visceral that people can really understand versus, say, Facebook.
Can I add a fact to this?
Yeah.
Arms List had, as part of their design, a space called Backroom, where unlicensed gun licensed, people who couldn't have a license to a gun could buy unregistered weapons. A domestic abuser says he wants to hurt his wife, doesn't have a license to a gun, gets it, and the company prevails in a Section 230 defense because it's user-generated content.
There's also the gun politics there.
But we can look at that. I mean, that's a very visceral case of, boy, that seems like that's a bad thing. But I again bring up as a counterexample my benign little Mastodon instance, and I would.
So but in the design case, Leo, Olivier, if I'm wrong in reading it this way, that the issue would be whether Mastodon is designed
right
in such a way
clearly Arms List
versus what Leo does in moderation.
Yeah, right.
What do you think of the, and I don't know the latest on it, but the various discussions in the UK on requiring a duty of care? Does that put a proper or too much of a requirement on these platforms that they can they, and this goes into AI very quickly, can you predict every use and every harmful outcome of something you've designed? Should you have a responsibility to do so? Is that possible?
I will add one more little thing to this. I just recently, like a minute ago, right before the show, banned an account that was posting nudity because I don't want nudity on my Mastodon. I don't want him to be able to come after me and say, well, my First Amendment right is being violated here.
Well, you're not the government.
Okay, you're right. That's true. Good point. Yeah. But I'm still being a censor.
This move that I know that you got just retort there, but this move you made is the argument that a lot of people, mostly on the right, have been making about the choice that Facebook makes.
They're conflating the First Amendment.
Yeah, but this point about the duty of care is really interesting. By the way, it's happening in the U.S. too with this discussions of CASA, the Kids Online Safety Act, is considering there's a duty of care statute provision in that bill. I am warm to that idea. For what it's worth, there are in law already obligations to attend to prospective harm, foreseeable harm, in the common law. Now, I can admit I tend to be a big government kind of person, so I'm not so worried about a new statutory provision that imposes an obligation to take care of people. But we already have negligence and product liability, as Jeff invoked. And the facts in some of these cases that have been litigated are really important, right? This is not like your Mastodon or instance, nor is it like Mastodon. It's Facebook internal reporting saying, we know that this stuff is hurting young girls, right? There are young girls that have kind of, developed psychological concerns involving their body. Stories about self-harm. They're internal reports, and the company does not heed them, right? This is foreseeable harm.
Yeah, those Frances Haugen documents were probably very much part of the jury's consideration, right?
Absolutely right. And I don't think you need a duty of care to get that, right?
So let me take this to AI if I can, because I think there's an interesting extension there. So I'll stipulate, Your Honor, that Facebook can have some harms and knows of those harms and has the data and thus should do something about them and could be held in different law liable for them. Okay, so let's presume that. But then the interesting discussion we get into with AI and with air quotes guardrails around them is my contention regularly is that it's a general machine like the printing press. You cannot predict every possible use to which it'll be put. You're not in control of every use to which it'll be put. You put a model out there. And so does the liability creep back to the AI creator, or does it rest with the user who asks for it to do something bad? Where do you see that? Because I think there's a straight line here from the internet into AI, and I'm curious where you think a precedent in one will affect analysis of the other.
I would have us look at case by case to see whether or not the developer of an AI model should be held accountable or not. And that sometimes the either the deployer or the user should be held responsible. I mean, I'm actually with you there, but let's consider the cases that are emerging. Again, they're very dramatic cases involving self-harm in children and AI chatbots, right? These are, or it doesn't even have to be a chatbot. ChatGPT, I mean, I don't know how you think of that, but I mean, I guess it's effectively a chatbot where young people and adults are, neurodivergent or especially vulnerable at any given moment. And the company knows that it is prone to sycophancy and instigating behaviors that would not be the sort of thing people would do in the absence of the existence of the chatbot. That's what happened in litigation involving a company called Character Technologies.
Garcia versus Character.
Garcia case out of Florida. And there are cases now involving adults and the disruption that these companies know that they're causing in people's psychological profile.
Are those, what if the argument is that those are edge cases? Do they have to design to the edge case, and does that affect the application for everybody else?
That's a legal question for me. I mean, that's the case by case question, right? So I don't feel like I have to. Maybe I should answer that squarely and say maybe it's the edge case, and so we can excuse it with regards to other ones, and maybe that's right. But there's just too much information that these companies hold, and the incentive that they have for deploying these services before they were ready, right? ChatGPT, character technologies, they're doing it because they're racing to get the model out.
Investment. Yep.
In spite of the knowledge that there is likely harm.
There's a new bellwether case actually coming up now with, I think, Snap just made a deal, but Meta is still involved, I believe. Anyway, we're going to see more and more of these cases around product liability. That seems to have kind of touched a nerve here, and it scared the hell out of Silicon Valley. I actually was one of the few technology people who think that LA decision wasn't a bad decision. I think it makes sense that they should have some product liability. What do you recommend, though? What should Section 230? You don't want to abolish it, but what should it be? How should it work to protect me, a little tech guy, to bring big tech to account and to protect the users?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with the LA and New Mexico cases, right? The companies are likely I think they've said they will appeal. And on the legal question of whether or not 230 is a protection for them. By the way, you might be surprised to hear me say this. The stuff I was writing in 2017 and 18 didn't talk about only revising the statute. It was just saying courts, look at the design of these applications, not the content. And so it may be, Leo, that nothing changes with regards to the statute and that the courts just get hip to the possibility that different features and applications are doing different things, right? That they're not just one big town square. But I do think, I would like to see a narrowing so that there is a knowledge-based legal regime, right? One that says you are held accountable when you know that stuff that you're doing is harmful. We do that in the copyright setting, right? I mean, Jeff and you, Leo, were asking about little tech. The DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, as you both surely know, is a safe harbor for companies that traffic in user-generated content that is copyrighted. YouTube, when it's a small company, right, the early 2000s, is taking a risk. But it's because the DMCA says you can only be held liable if you don't take the content down when you hear about it.
Right.
I don't see why this kind of regime isn't possible, particularly given the close attention the companies pay to the content that consumers are getting.
The hazard that exists, Leo has to deal with all the time. We can't play a video of anything on this show because somebody, not the actual copyright owner, is going to come in and take advantage of that on YouTube and get things taken down for harassment purposes.
It has a chilling effect. Yeah.
The heckler's veto.
So I think logically I agree with you, but the
veto.
question is, how does it get exploited by malign actors?
Yeah, there's a statute that, I think I'm mostly okay with the Take It Down Act that Congress passed last year, right, involving the distribution of non-consensual imagery, AI-generated non-consensual imagery. And many people are concerned that it could be weaponized. I know it's a term du jour, but can be weaponized by people who just want to go after, someone they don't like. So I think that that's a real threat, a real possibility. But you know what? We live in a world where this has always been the baseline, and where the kind of protections that companies enjoy are exceptional.
According to AI, you tell me if it's a hallucination. Your next project is about public space, whether the internet could recreate the forced encounter of a subway car where you can't curate who's sitting next to you.
Wow, that's some deep AI readings. Is
that true?
I think I did a podcast where I mused about this, and now I'm working on this project.
My AI listens to all the podcasts, especially.
Well, I'm going to go back to my roots and to my infrastructure roots and talk about shared spaces. I grew up in New York City. My parents are Haitian immigrants. I learned to become a New Yorker and an American by way of the subway, through public parks, through the radio. My dissertation is about the radio. And I don't know if we can transcode all of that for the internet, but I want to think about how to do that. And so, yes, but you just blasted this out more than I thought I'm ready.
Now it's 2 podcasts. You're for sure that's going to be surfacing. I like the idea. No, I think it's I was intrigued when I saw that because I really find that an intriguing concept. And it is something we lose. Jeff and I have argued over Eli Pariser's filter bubble.
Yeah.
He doesn't quite believe that's the case. But I do think that the serendipity of encounters on the internet is part of its real value.
Yeah. So I don't know if I want to talk about serendipity so much because that's been, people have been talking about that for a while. And Jeff has, I mean, I'm hip to the idea, but it's this idea we've relinquished public resources to private administrators.
I agree.
The language that lawyers use is to talk about governance, right? The governance regimes. I actually think my law project is about Lawrence Lessig's Code is Law, the argument that you might, in some instances, defer to technologists to come up with a regulatory regime. The language of governance comes up here. I think I want to push back a little bit on maybe a lot on this, and not relinquish the role that public lawmaking bodies have in assuring that valuable communicative resources are available to everyone.
I've got two questions for you. I just want to make sure I get these in before we leave. One is, say more about your dissertation.
Yeah, Jeff is being kind to me because I have I'll be just rounding out my 50th year as a radio broadcaster.
Yeah, so I'm really eager to hear that. I'll
tell you the second
one to do in the order you want. I'm very eager to hear what you think of the present FCC head and ABC and such, if you're willing to talk about that.
Oh,
But
Lord.
you pick 'em.
Jeff, that's a 2-hour conversation.
It is.
I'm happy to dispose of the second one quickly. It is lawless, politically motivated, unconstitutional, plainly unconstitutional, right? I mean, and I think there are many people on the left and the right who see that. When you're
see that, that's why we don't like the Take It Down Act, because of that kind of lawlessness.
That's why I mentioned weaponization. I do think that this is susceptible. This is a weaponization of agency power, which is squarely at odds with the First Amendment. I'm very happy you want to talk about the Radio Act of 1927, which is what the subject of the dissertation was. And my argument was to associate it with the Immigration Act of 1924 and a kind of cultural conservatism. But it was about assimilation. It was about the cities and immigrants.
This was the Public Interest Act, right? This is the one that said stations had to act because they're using public airwaves in the public interest.
That's right. And so it's a kind of it's an ideological history. Like, why did that happen? The alternative would have been what Ronald Coase asked for a couple decades later, and that is an auction system, which is what the FCC eventually gets in 1996, or a little bit before, but then in 1996. So, the Radio Act of 1927 is an archive. It's old news. I talk to my students about it, and they don't know what I'm talking about. And then I tell them it's Title III of the current Communications Act. It governs your cell phones. So there you go.
What's the title? I'm writing a book next about the death of mass media. What's the title of the dissertation?
I'm looking at it now. Domesticating the Great Throbbing Common Pulse.
Ooh, good title for it.
Wow.
That's sensationalism in dissertation titles.
Is
good
that
work.
published anywhere?
I appreciate that you asked. It's not. And someone I think you both know was my dissertation advisor, Todd Gitlin.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
And James Carey was the original supporter.
I'm a James Carey worshiper.
Yeah,
I quote him
I'm not familiar
constantly.
with James Carey, Jeff.
I just reread another essay of his about religion, and because he was a believer in the idea that media is a you studied with him, you know far better than I would, is often not the transmission of information, but instead is ritual.
Yeah,
and he makes, and I think if you look at media that way, and reading newspapers like going to mass. It confirms something for you.
I would use a less loaded term, maybe culture.
Yeah.
Because I really do. I've been thinking a lot about this lately is how we transmit culture and how subcultures get transmitted. And we have geographic subcultures in this country that have become a real issue, if you ask me. But unfortunately, our time
Oh, wow.
Olivier is up. I wish we had more time with
Oh, I wanted to say more of what you just said.
Say more. All right. I'll let. Okay. It's your time, not mine. Go ahead.
So Jim Carrey was a cultural theorist, right? And I think, and he would have said so. So I'm glad to hear you say it. And my project was partly about the dissertation talked about German language as emerging, German language newspapers emerging in Brooklyn, but that there are many people who are worried about immigrants not assimilating quickly enough. So the public interest would bring them in.
No kidding. That was the point?
Well, it was a provocative argument. I don't think everyone bought my argument. But
that's fascinating. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, actually.
There's also a technical reason, right? Radio signal interference. That's the stated reason for the regulation of radio.
And as somebody who worked for years in broadcast stations where you had to have a public file on record and people could come to the front desk and demand the public file, and I had to read PSAs every hour, public service announcements every hour, all in service to, I guess it was superseded by a later act, but to the idea that radio was a public service. But I never thought of it as a way to force assimilation.
Well, so I can't say my argument is the one that is the prevailing one.
I will, Olivier, I'll give you something, though. If you look at the rise of right-wing radio in this country.
No kidding.
That has been a huge force in our political culture.
Certainly.
Yeah. To the day when the Fairness Doctrine is repealed, to the day, right? Rush Limbaugh comes on the scene. So
isn't that interesting?
Well, I'll return one more time to the Hutchins Commission report because it's fresh on my mind. The concern with and mind you, there were a hell of a lot more media outlets and company and owners at the time in 1947. But the concern was that the monopolization of the mechanisms of speech meant that what wouldn't be heard, and pushing free speech to that limit of saying, of tolerating things that we may not want to hear but need to hear to be part of public discourse, and grappling with that at the time. And I think it's time for the exact same discussion today, but in very changed circumstances.
Yeah.
By the way, that James Carey essay, if any of the listeners want to actually look it up, it's The Mass Media and Democracy Between the Modern and the Postmodern.
Now I've got to read
It's a brilliant essay.
Yeah.
Brilliant essay. Agreed.
I'll give you something else to read. Your homework, Reclaiming the Internet, How Big Tech Took Control and How We Can Take It Back. Our guest, Professor Olivier Sylvain from Fordham Law School. Thank you so much, Professor Sylvain. Really.
So, Olivier, I went to my first year at college at Claremont, and I was going to go to law school. And then I said, nah, I'm not going to do that. And generally, I'm glad I made that decision. But in a conversation with the likes of you, I really regret not having had the opportunity for exactly these kinds of discussions.
Oh, that's very generous. It means a lot. It means a lot to hear from you.
I think that's what happens is that future lawyers get enticed by the intellectual excitement of the whole thing, and then they get to work at a law firm in the basement reading documents.
Instead, you get your PhD and teach. That's a far better path.
Well, I got a PhD after 3 years of reading documents in the basement.
You did.
You learned. The happiest lawyers I've ever met are all lapsed. So there you go. Really, really a pleasure to meet you. And
yes.
But now you've got me thinking about all sorts of stuff.
We still got to work on the small tech problem. I like that.
Well,
question.
it is. I mean, for me, it's really significant, obviously.
Yeah, sure.
And this is why I really defend Section 230 every time it comes up, because it isn't just big tech. And it's so easy to think it's just about big tech.
The irony of newspaper publishers going after 230 is that they are protected by it. Not with their own content, but when they have forums and comments and all of that.
Comment sections, yeah.
Online, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you a maybe there's a common place we can agree on, although I have some resistance. And there are people who've talked about revising 230 so that it's only something that smaller companies can invoke, right? So, and that's not exceptional in current law, right? So there's that. I don't love that because the business model bakes in incentives when companies just start, and I worry that to the extent a small company is engaged in dangerous design decisions, that those get immune from inquiry.
I'll end with Julia Angwin's comments on your book. Olivier shows us clearly what we have allowed the internet to become, a haunted house version of a shopping mall full of dangerous products, scams, frauds, and abuse.
That's an A+ blurb. That's good.
We will do really nice blurb. We would do well to heed Sylvain's carefully crafted plan to clean up this mess.
And by the way, I just downloaded your dissertation. I can't wait to read it.
Oh, it's
my
online.
gosh.
See, there is a way to get it.
I'm scared now. I'm sorry.
You were young. It's okay. You didn't know any better.
I was the oldest person in my cohort, but
Really?
I mean, I had a job. I had been in the world. I was a lawyer.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's good for people to have some real world experience too. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much.
Time.
Thank you, Liam. Thanks for keeping calling me Professor. It's okay to call me Olivier, by the way.
Okay. Well, my contrary to Jeff's experience, my dad started at Fordham, but ended up moving to Columbia. So there you go.
All right. I'll forgive him.
Thanks so much. We'll talk soon, I hope. And I look forward to talking more about these issues. I think.
Thanks very much, Liam. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Take care, Olivier. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this highlight from Intelligent Machines. You know, we do the show every Wednesday. You can watch us do it live. Or, as they say, like and subscribe. There's a link down below. Thanks.